Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am Tara and this is Catherine, and we are from Lumara Grief and Bereavement Care Society, here to do our book reviews, to share reviews of children's books with you for the Grief in the Classroom project. And this is the second edition that we have. So today we're going to do the introduction a little bit brief so that we can jump right into the content. And we encourage you to check out our first video for a more detailed introduction to this project.
And as part of that, just a highlight, Lumara supporting bereaved families, all kinds of services that we offer. And we're delighted that as part of this, we can do some grief education that will be supportive, we hope, for classrooms and for families and for caregivers of the bereaved. As you see there, we know that grief is in our classrooms. We know that grieving is healthy. It's a absolutely adaptive response to addressing the losses of life, not just loss by death. And we also know classrooms are really busy places. They're also really important places. So please share with us your feedback on these book reviews. We'd love to know how they are supporting you in the work that you're doing. Over to you for an introduction.
Yeah, and again, just briefly, not to be too repetitive, my name is Tara Such. I'm a clinical counselor, been working with Lumara since 2019. And I also work with Hospice Society and spend a lot of my time with young grieving children and youth, also doing work in schools.
And I'm Catherine Heinel. I've been working with Lumara since 2016. My first introduction to Lumara was by volunteering at camp. And we offer many, many kinds of services. Our Camp Carry is certainly one of the, I think, one of the ways that we're well known for bereaved families. And both Tara and I have a love of nature. Camp is part of that. We tap into that in the work that we do in Lumara. And so our backgrounds are calming for us. Hopefully they're calming for you, and they're part of how we one of the things we tap into in terms of resources for processing loss. So our book today is a grief focused book. So it's going to be talking about a particular type of loss and or the process of grieving. And we'll share more about that book in just a second. Book for today, or for this video, I should say, is The Memory Box. There you have the details on the author, the publisher, and I'm going to hand it over to Tara for a synopsis about this book.
Great. So in this book, The Memory Box, a book about grief, we begin with the story of a young person who has their red balloon, and they lose their red balloon. And then the narrator, who is the young person who speaks from the perspective of I, speaks to, that I was sad to lose my balloon, and nothing compared to the way that I miss you, or the loss that I have for you. And so throughout the book, the young person describes how much they miss this, we're going to guess is a family member, could be a friend, who has died. And they talk about how they want to be able to remember this person, and there's a fear around forgetting them, and so their commitment to remembering this person is the creation of a memory box. And so they build this memory box and describe how they fill the memory box of memories of places that they went together, activities that they did together, places that they had hoped to go together. There's a scene in the book where the family comes together and everyone shares stories together and brings out the memory box, and they each share different stories that they may have heard before. Some of them may be new, these new memories of remembering this loved person. And then the young person also talks about, and it's still sad, and so there's images of the young person looks like visiting a cemetery or looking out the window and saying, and I'm sad. And then there's also this part near the end of the book, like, and I'm creating these new memories. And so the book features the young person, trying a new sport. Looks like they're doing some synchronized swimming, or, going to a park, or doing these new things. So I'm remembering you and all of our memories. And I'm also experiencing and making these new memories as well. And that's the brief synopsis of this book.
And I'm thinking about some of my own losses, and there is that tension in a way, or that pull to, not want to forget, want to be able to remember, but it can hurt to remember. And that need for life to grow around loss, right? Life continues. And so I'm hearing it touches on all of those facets of what might be present in a grief process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particular things that you like about this book, or who you think it's best served?
Yeah. So again, you've probably heard me talk about the importance of representation and how a young person can see themselves in a book. So one of the things that is good about this book is we don't actually have the person identified as who they're remembering. So sometimes I really like a book if I know that, for example, a young person has lost a dad, and I happen to have a book about losing a dad, that's great. And this doesn't necessarily say it's mom or dad or grandpa or who it is. And that can be really helpful just in terms of getting more use out of the book, because with the wide variety of kids that you might be working with and their unique losses, it's helpful that we don't actually know who in particular this young person is talking about. The narrator speaks from the perspective I. They do look like a girl, so they probably are a girl, but not necessarily. So it's an I perspective when the person is speaking, when they're describing themselves. I like that it's very specific around the memory box. Memory box is a really great activity to do with a grieving young person, or adult for that matter too. So I like that the book is fairly detailed of like, what is a memory box and how do you make one of those? So it's great that the story actually illustrates a really helpful and practical thing that you can do. So I really appreciate that about this book.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, what I'm hearing is that the book doesn't indicate any genders explicitly in the language, both for the person who has experienced the loss and for
that's right,
who has been lost.
Yeah. So there's some ambiguity there, which means you can fill in the blanks based on your experience. Yeah.
So, and then I'm hearing then it could also be used in a school setting, for example, where a classmate has died or a teacher has died. These would be examples of how it might be applied in that way.
Yeah.
Age range for this one?
Age range, I would probably say I would go 6 and up, maybe 5 too, but not quite. The previous book could go quite young, but I would go a little bit older for this one. 5 or 6 and upward from there.
Okay. Anything to consider when using this book?
Yeah, so there is it's very subtle. But there are, in terms of some symbols in the book, so the young person does visit a cemetery. We can see some crosses there. So, I know, for example, in some cultures, young people aren't permitted to go to a cemetery, or a cemetery might not be part of your practice for the people who die. So just noting that that's an image. It's not described. There isn't a description of that. It's not amplified, but there is that image in there. And there's also one image of the young person looking out the window, and it looks like it probably is a church in the distance, although it doesn't have a cross. But it does look like it. There's another scene where they're sitting on the ground, and there's a big stained glass window that would likely be a church as well. But again, these are really subtle. They're not emphasized. It's not there isn't anything that's sort of religious that's in the storyline in any way. It's more just these subtle symbols that are included in the book.
Okay, so just something for who's ever using the book to think about, and that's whether that how that might matter in their particular context. Okay. Okay, then in terms of using this book in other ways, what do we have here? You want to tell us?
Yeah, so in terms of obviously creating a memory box is of course the go-to activity for working with this book. And so one way that you could get started with that process, for example, if you're doing it in your classroom, is you could get started with collaging the outside of the box or drawing on it or coloring on it. So you could begin the process of what does that actual box look like. Then if you want to begin to fill the memory box, you could write memories down on a piece of paper, or you could go into nature and collect items from nature to put things in the box. One thing that's really helpful is this activity can be something that can be carried forward in terms of the children going home. So you could connect with the child's caregivers and they could continue to work with that memory box at home. Particularly when it comes to valuable memories, I would caution against asking young people to, if you were to say, we're doing a memory box, bring in valuable things from home. The risk of those being lost or damaged are just really strong. So I would caution against that. That's why I'd say focus on the collaging or the collecting things from nature, writing things on paper. But when they go home is a more appropriate place for valuables and items from home to go into the memory box when it's stored at home. And and sometimes, it can be a really great opportunity to connect with that young person's family who may also be unsure in terms of how to hold space for these conversations with the child. And this could be a really valuable opener for them to sort of have that invitation of, your child's bringing home a memory box and, what that is and how you can have conversation around that and be part of incorporating things in that box.
And as we were mentioning earlier about life growing around loss and sort of the future, I'm imagining that the memory box could also be used in a way to record memories that you from the present day when that individual is no longer here in a physical form. If there's memories of something that's happening now that you would like to share with that person by thinking about it as a memory, here's what we did last week. That would be another way you could, those things you could write down and include in the memory box in that way too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next one we have is, you could collect some information about a favorite place that reminds that child of their significant person. So, did they go on a holiday? Was there a place that they visited around the neighborhood or a favorite park or whatnot? And you could invite the opportunity to do a guided visualization around visiting that place. And so basically, if you're not familiar with guided visualizations, there's a lot of them online. So I would just recommend, a quick Google search to get familiar. But basically what that entails is a description of landscape and encouraging of the person to, tune into their breath, relax their body, and allow their mind's eye to take them to this beautiful place. Can they hear the sounds of that place? Can they see the wind blowing in the trees, for example? And really, you just begin to elaborate on the senses that, would be experienced in this place. And it's an opportunity to practice relaxation and regulation and a way to access memories in a way that feels comforting and it feels safe. So that's something that you could also invite as a therapeutic option.
Yeah, I'm as you were talking, I was and looking at our images in the background. I was just imagining myself in the forest already. And thank you for that. Right there, happening live and in person. Yeah. I just had a thought about box. I suppose any, shoe box or any kind of box,
Box.
any size box can can
Any size box would do. Yeah. Sometimes I've even used envelopes, like a big envelope if you wanted, if you don't have a box handy or you're, tight on space or yeah, anything.
anything, any sort of container,
Yep.
basically.
Any kind of container.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could use a Tupperware container. You could collage it with some beautiful pictures on the outside and
Or
yeah.
a jar, I suppose, if you
A
had
jar. Yeah. Yep. One of those mason
any
jars.
of those, any sort of container. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so with that, we have introduced and given a bit of a review on the memory box, another book to potentially use in your classroom. And as always, we'll have a handout that summarizes what we've been talking about around this book as an added resource to support you in your classroom. Once
Mhm.
again, thank you for spending time with us. And on behalf of Lumara, we bid you goodbye for today.
Yeah. Goodbye for now. Thanks for being here.